The laughter started before I even reached the table. Every head turned toward me with the kind of smirk that made it obvious I was the punchline, and when I finally saw the woman sitting alone by the window with one trembling hand resting over her pregnant belly, I realized exactly what they had done. They had arranged this blind date as a cruel joke, expecting me to be embarrassed enough to walk away. But before I could even sit down, she looked at me with exhausted blue eyes filled with quiet shame and whispered that she shouldn't have come. In that heartbreaking moment, the laughter around us disappeared. I wasn't looking at someone's joke anymore. I was looking at someone whose spirit had been crushed long before she ever walked into that cafe. If you believe kindness can change a life, forgiveness can heal old wounds, hope is never truly lost, and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. My name is Garrett, and until that afternoon I believed people revealed who they truly were only during life's biggest moments. I never imagined that lesson would arrive over a cup of coffee arranged by coworkers who considered humiliation a form of entertainment. They knew I had been single for years after caring for my late father through his illness. They also knew I had ignored every attempt to set me up with someone. So when they announced they had finally found the perfect woman for me, I assumed they were simply trying too hard. I had no idea they had convinced a complete stranger to participate in their prank. Her name was Celeste. She looked no older than 28, though sadness had added years to her face. She wore a simple light blue dress that barely fit around her growing stomach, and every few seconds she glanced toward the exit as though she expected someone to rescue her from the situation. Instead of introducing herself confidently, she apologized for existing. She quietly explained that she had been told I knew everything about her and still wanted to meet. She had only agreed because a neighbor insisted that maybe life was finally offering her a little kindness. The cruel truth unraveled within minutes. One of my coworkers had lied to both of us. They had told me nothing about her and had told her that I specifically requested to meet a woman who was expecting a baby because I admired women raising children alone. They thought the misunderstanding would create an awkward disaster everyone could laugh about on Monday morning. For a long moment I simply stared at the coffee in front of me, trying to understand how adults could enjoy hurting strangers. Then I looked back at Celeste. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding an explanation. She simply looked defeated, as though this betrayal fit perfectly with everything else life had already done to her. Instead of leaving, I asked if she wanted to stay long enough to enjoy lunch since we were already there. She hesitated before giving the smallest nod. It wasn't trust. It was exhaustion. As the afternoon continued, pieces of her story emerged naturally. She had worked as a physical therapist until pregnancy complications forced her onto medical leave. The baby's father had disappeared after learning she refused to end the pregnancy. Her apartment lease was ending. Medical bills kept growing. Friends who once promised lifelong loyalty slowly stopped answering her calls because hardship made them uncomfortable. The most painful part wasn't the abandonment. It was how often people treated her pregnancy as proof she had somehow failed at life. When we finished eating, I apologized for everything my coworkers had done. She surprised me by thanking me instead. She admitted she had expected me to laugh with everyone else. That sentence followed me home. The following week I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because I felt pity, but because I admired the quiet strength it took for her to keep moving despite carrying so much disappointment. I sent her a message asking whether she'd like to visit the botanical gardens one sunny afternoon. She accepted with cautious gratitude. There was something peaceful about spending time with someone who had no interest in pretending life was perfect. We talked while walking through blooming flowers and quiet pathways filled with families, elderly couples, and children chasing butterflies. She smiled more that afternoon than she had in the cafe, though every smile seemed unfamiliar to her own face. Over the next several weeks we became friends. Nothing more. We attended community events, visited local farmers markets, and spent afternoons sitting beside the river watching ducks glide through the water. Everything happened under bright skies and warm sunlight, as though nature itself refused to let darkness define either of us. Eventually she admitted the hardest part of pregnancy wasn't physical discomfort. It was believing her child deserved a better mother than someone constantly afraid that I told her something I wished someone had told her years earlier. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who choose love every single day, she cried quietly while pretending to watch the river. Meanwhile my coworkers discovered I had continued seeing her. The jokes became louder. Some asked whether I planned to raise another man's child. Others claimed I was throwing away my future out of misplaced sympathy. A few even congratulated themselves for creating the world's strangest love story. For the first time in my career, I stopped worrying about fitting in. One afternoon they laughed in the break room while making another comment about Celeste. Instead of ignoring it, I calmly asked whether humiliating vulnerable people had become part of our company values. The room became silent. Our department manager happened to overhear the conversation. Within days several employees received disciplinary action after an internal investigation uncovered months of harassment directed toward multiple coworkers, not just me. Funny enough, none of them laughed after that. As summer continued, Celeste slowly rebuilt pieces of her confidence. She returned to painting, something she had abandoned years earlier. She filled blank canvases with colorful landscapes that reflected hope instead of loneliness. She even started volunteering at a local community center, helping children create artwork during daytime programs. Watching her encourage frightened children made me realize something remarkable: people who have suffered deeply often recognize broken hearts before anyone else does. One bright morning, she asked if I would accompany her to a prenatal appointment because she was terrified of hearing bad news alone. Everything went well. The baby was healthy. The doctor smiled throughout the visit. Walking out into the warm sunshine, Celeste laughed with genuine relief for the first time since I had met her. That laugh changed something inside me. Months earlier I had agreed to a blind date expecting nothing. Now I couldn't imagine my days without hearing her voice. Still, I refused to rush anything. She had experienced enough disappointment. I wanted every step forward to feel safe. Then another unexpected challenge arrived. Her landlord announced the building had been sold, forcing every tenant to move within weeks. She tried hiding the news from me because she didn't want to become anyone's burden. When I eventually found out, I helped organize friends from the community center. Volunteers packed boxes, found affordable housing, donated furniture, and transformed a tiny apartment into a welcoming home before sunset. Looking around the finished space, Celeste whispered that she had forgotten strangers could become family. That I reminded her they weren't strangers anymore, they were people who had seen her kindness and wanted to return it. Not long afterward, her son entered the world on a beautiful autumn morning while sunlight streamed through hospital windows. She named him Rowan because the tree symbolizes protection and resilience. When she placed that tiny boy into my arms, I understood love isn't always born from romance. Sometimes it grows quietly through compassion until one day it becomes impossible to separate from your heart. The months that followed were filled with ordinary miracles. Sleepless afternoons, stroller walks through neighborhood parks, tiny fingers wrapped around mine, first smiles, and countless moments that no expensive vacation or luxurious purchase could ever replace. One afternoon while Rowan slept peacefully in his stroller, I confessed that somewhere between our awkward first meeting and every shared sunrise afterward, I had fallen in love with both of them. Celeste didn't answer immediately. Instead, tears filled her eyes as she admitted she had spent months convincing herself happiness belonged to other people. That I gently reminded her that sometimes happiness simply gets lost before finding the right address. A year after our first meeting, I brought her back to the same cafe where everything had begun. The tables were different. The staff had changed. The cruel laughter was gone. This time I wasn't nervous. That I simply took her hands and told her that the greatest gift life had ever given me arrived disguised as someone else's joke. I asked whether she would let me spend the rest of my life proving that neither she nor Rowan would ever face another difficult day alone if I could help it. She smiled through joyful tears before saying yes. Several customers applauded quietly after realizing what had happened. Even the elderly waitress wiped away tears. Our wedding took place several months later beneath clear afternoon skies in a public garden surrounded by flowers, friends, neighbors, and the community that had embraced us. Rowan toddled down the aisle holding a tiny basket nearly bigger than himself, making everyone laugh. There were no extravagant decorations or expensive performances. There was simply gratitude filling every heart present. During the reception I noticed one familiar face standing awkwardly near the entrance. It was one of the co-workers who had organized the original prank. He approached with genuine regret written across his face. Life had humbled him after losing both his job and several close relationships because of the person he had become. He apologized without excuses and admitted watching our story unfold forced him to confront his own cruelty. For a moment I remembered the humiliation, the laughter, and the pain that afternoon had caused. Then I remembered everything good that had grown from it. I accepted his apology, not because the past disappeared, but because carrying bitterness would only steal joy from the future we had built. Years later, whenever Rowan asked how his mother and I first met, we always smiled before telling him that sometimes people intend to break your heart, but life has a remarkable way of turning cruelty into unexpected blessings. The greatest relationships are rarely built on perfect beginnings. They are built by ordinary people choosing kindness when everyone else chooses judgment. Before this story comes to an end, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether you believe one act of kindness can completely change someone's future, or if you've ever witnessed a second chance transform a life. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that the person everyone else overlooks today may become the greatest blessing in someone's life tomorrow, and sometimes the smallest act of compassion becomes the beginning of a story that changes many lives forever.